All right, so continuing with the story. At this time in 2014, by the time when I hurt my the right tendon behind my knee, and the medial or the interior part, I already had a hurt left tendon, so I had two hurt legs at this point. So things were really screwed up at this point. And then I remember my friend Noah came to visit me, and at this point, I was still a right winger. I was still pro white. Remember, my whole life I was a communist, leftist, anti-white, as communist leftist as you can be, But like I said, I tried to use my grandpa's metapsychiatry to justify my leftism. So, my grandpa would be like, yeah, being good isn't necessarily the flow. Being good can be conformity. So being bad can be closer to the flow, because at least you're not in conformity. And I understood that in terms of basketball. Like, if you do what the coach says, you're not in the flow. But also, if you don't do what the coach says, you're not in the flow either. But the flow is something different. If you're like being a nonconformist and shooting all weird, that's also not the flow. But I knew that my shot was so good because I didn't do what coaches said. I did what my dad said, and I did what I did. I always shot sideways, and my dad said, "Yeah, shoot sideways like you shoot." Now, when the shoot away messed up my shot, my dad tried to manipulate me to shoot sideways, didn't realizing that the reason I shot sideways is the way I moved into shots. And I was picking the ball for rack and just trying to make me artificially shoot sideways. I'm not going to go into details. I don't want to make good shooters think. But he messed up my shot. It messed up my shot. And it was bad. But basically, I was a leftist. I was a communist my whole life. And I was anti-white. Because I saw myself as Jewish and I wanted to see race mixing. I remember I always loved to see people who were race mixed. And I was always anti-white. I was looked down upon white people, especially Aryan people. And I think that that's the way a lot of Jewish people are. And, so that's the way that I was. And I know how they think. I know how that mentality is. So, but then, as I said, in 2014, I started to recognize that I was anti-white my whole life, and I started to become pro-white. And but what was fascinating is I know how a right-winger thinks too now. So, like, I remember I started like watching all the YouTube videos, and like Peterson, who's a black guy who's a right-winger, he was saying like, no, actually the Democrats are the racist ones, because the reason why they do the social welfare is because it makes it so that the black people, it incentivizes them to break apart their families, because they get more money if they don't have a family that's together. And that is and then so it destroys the black people. So actually the Democrats are really the racist ones. And the first abortion people, they were the racist ones. Like Margaret Sanger, she had abortion because she wanted to destroy black people. And so like that, so I started developing all those types of worldviews. Like I was thinking like, oh yeah, Democrats are actually the racist ones. When really my whole life, when I was a Democrat, I was anti-white and I was for black people. But when I think about it too, I really, because I saw myself as Jewish, I do think that in the grand scheme of things, I really was just pro-Jewish. And, I did look most highly upon Jewish people, but I saw Jews as more people of color, and more black. And I looked down upon white people. But regardless, I wanted to defeat the white people. And but I was always a Democrat. I was always very left-wing, very liberal. And when I look at it now, it's like, no, when I was a Democrat and I was for social welfare, it wasn't because I wanted to destroy black people, like the Republicans, or like, Peterson, or not Jordan Peterson, but the black guy Peterson. And like those guys try to say like, oh no, the Democrats are actually the racist ones. They're the ones who don't like black people. That's not true. I wanted to destroy white people. It's not that I didn't like black people. And when I was a Democrat and a leftist, I thought that welfare was good, because I thought that, only the Nazis and the white supremacists are against welfare because they're against giving to the people of color. And I wanted to give to the people of color because I wanted to destroy white people. And I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish and I looked down upon white people, and I wanted to defeat them. And I saw Aryans as the biggest threat to Jewish people. And I saw myself as more black as a Jew, right? So, I was always for welfare. And my grandpa, I always thought he was a white supremacist because he didn't seem to be for welfare. Because he was thought, it's important to be independent, and it's important to, get a job and leverage your assets and be competent and stuff. And I was like, yeah, typical white supremacist, against welfare, but my grandpa would even say, in the flow, there's no formula. And sometimes if people are in the flow, sometimes welfare can be beneficial and stuff like that. And, you know, if you're in the flow, there is no one set formula. And if you're in the flow, you're receptive to what's most effective at the time. But when I was, you know, I know that I wasn't in the flow. I had a predator-prey software orientation, and I was predatory toward white people. I looked down upon white people. And and also like abortion, like, you know, the right wingers would be like my friend who's a right winger, my friend he's like half Italian, half Irish. I'm not gonna say his name, but he's one of those guys who'd be like, oh yeah, the KKK, they're actually the Democrats, and the Democrats are actually the racist ones who hate black people. And you know, the abortion was originally to destroy black people, and you know, the Democrats are the ones who are for abortion, and that's what he's always on about, right? But the thing is, like, I know that that's wrong. Now I look at it, I'm like, I know that's wrong, because when I was a Democrat leftist and stuff my whole life, like, I was for abortion because I was like, oh, it's only the Nazis, the white supremacists who are for abortion. It's just racist people who are against abortion, and because they want to make women into baby makers and they want to maintain the white race. And the reason why I was against abortion was, I mean, I'm for abortion was because I was like, yeah, I was against the Nazis, and I thought Nazis were the ones who wanted to make women baby makers and were against promiscuity. And, you know, so I was, you know, for abortion. Now, my grandpa, you know, my grandpa was like, he didn't like abortion. I remember I thought, oh, yep, he's a white supremacist. But now my grandpa would say that, again, there's no formula. He would say if you're in the flow, you'd be able to discern, like, okay, in this society, a lot of women are killing themselves because they're getting abortions, you know, in illegal manners, and they're dying. And so that you might be able to make concessions. You might make concessions and allow abortions in certain cases and stuff. And my grandpa would say, for the most part, promiscuity is not existentially valid. And he would say that, you know, abortions are not existentially valid. They don't lead to happiness, true happiness. And, you know, it is problematic. And he said, like, if you're in the flow, you see everything as one, and you wouldn't even want to hurt insects, let alone fetuses, right? But at this time, you know, when my whole life, hold on. My whole life I was, you know, against, you know, my whole life you know, but anyways, my friend who's a right winger, and, you know, he's really racist. Like, he's racist against black people. And when, you know, when I became a right winger, I was racist. And I know that right wingers, and, you know, they tend to be the ones who are quote unquote racist against black people, right? But then they kind of project, and that's the way that I was at this time, though. So it's interesting to look at it, because at this time, I remember I became like that. Like, I was like, yeah, you know, it's the Democrats, it's the leftists who are actually the racist ones. And I remember, like, when my friend Noah came to visit, I remember my whole life I was a communist. I was really for communism, and Noah was a big time communist, and Noah's kind of into race mixing too. And he's Jewish, or his dad's Jewish, and he looks very, like, exotic, right? Like, very, like, Semitic, right? But I remember, like, my whole life I was a communist, and the reason why was because I was anti-white, and I was, you know, I thought that communism was good for people of color. And I was against borders because I wanted to mix the white race. And I was, you know, I really was anti-white. And I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish. But, you know, but then when I became a right winger in 2014, I remember this is the way that my mind flipped things. I was like, actually, the communists are the racist ones. The communists are the racist ones towards people of color. And then so I was talking to my friend Noah, and because I'd been doing research on it, I was like, you know, Marx actually said that black people are inferior. And he said that the Jews who, you know, are into capitalism are actually the ones who are mixed with the Egyptians, who are more black people, and they're more materialistic. And you know, he was actually racist. You know, communism's actually racist, and actually racist against people of color. So, and then Noah was like, what are you talking about? But that's the thing, is, like, I know now, looking at it, like, I know that the reason why I liked communism when I was a leftist was because it was anti-white. And I wanted to destroy white people, and I thought that was good for people of color. And I saw Jews as more people of color, and I wanted to mix the white people. I know now I was satanic, because that's what the Satan in Hindu mythology, Shukracharya, he's for race mixing, and he's against the Aryans, he's for the Dravidians, and he's against religion, and he wants, you know, communism. And that's the way that I was. And I was for the Dravidians. I was for the people of color when I was a leftist and a communist. But then when I became a right winger, I tried to flip it, and I tried to project, and I was like, no, the communists are the ones who are racist against black people. And, I'm actually the one who's not racist against black people. I want what's best for black people, and communism is not what's best for black people. Um, but, when I look at it, but then I started be thinking like, yeah, race mixing is not what's best for black people. So, but, I thought like, those, the right wingers think, like Peterson, he's like, yeah, when you give people welfare and stuff, then they don't get jobs, and this destroys the family. You incentivize the destruction of family, and that's not good for black people. And that's the way I started to try to think of things. Now the thing is though, like I said, when I was a leftist, I was anti-white. When I became a right winger, I was pro-white. And really, the reason why I was against communism because I was pro-white, and I wanted to protect the white people. And I started becoming, looking down upon people of color more when I became a right winger. Like I think most right wingers are. They're not really the ones who are trying to who like are for the people of color, but they're more pro-white. They're trying to help the white people, and that's the way that I became. But I started to be like, and I started to think like, yeah, Cesar Chavez, he was really a white guy, and I heard that in Cuba they were racist against the black people in communism, and really communism's really the racist one. They're really the ones who are against black people, not the right wingers. The right wingers are the good ones. So it's kind of crazy. Like, so I kind of got confused. I kind of got crazy at that time because I actually started trying to think this way. Started thinking this way. There is validity to it. Like Farrakhan, he's kind of right winger. He doesn't want race mixing because he says this is what's best for black people. Or like Dr. Umar, he's like, it's best for black people. Why? So like I wanted race mixing to destroy the white people. And I'll just like give an example of this. Like I knew this like Jewish guy from a synagogue, and he said something about Germans. He's like, yeah, the Huns. He's like, barbaric Huns or whatever. And so he's anti-white, right? And that's the way that I was my whole life. But when I became pro-white, I remember that's when he told me this, and I remember I was looking at him like, you mother effer, like you're one of those like race mixing Jew guys, right? And then that Jewish guy, he would bring a little black boy. I don't even know who the black boy is, but he was into basketball, right? And he'd bring this little black boy to a synagogue, and he'd be like walking around with the black boy. And I remember the Jewish guy had like kind of like black type of features and stuff, and he probably saw himself as more black, and he was really into black, so he's probably very into race mixing and stuff. And he's a Reformed Jew, right? He's not an Orthodox Jew. He's Reformed, so he's probably into race mixing and everything, and anti-white. And by the way, things he says, he's anti-white, and that's the way that I was. So, regardless, I became more of a right winger at this point. So I was against communism. I was against leftists, and I was pro-white. But in my mind, I was like, oh, the right wing or the left wingers are the real racist ones. But really, they're really the ones who are racist against black people. But really, like when I was left winger, I wasn't racist against black people. I wanted the black people to defeat the white people. I wanted the people of color to defeat the white people and mix them. And, because I saw the whites as the biggest threat, especially to the Jews. So really, I think I looked most highly upon the Jews. And, I wanted the Jews to win. And I thought that by mixing, especially mixing the white people, that's the way that it would work. I think that's the way that I saw things. But I saw Jews as more mixed. I saw Jews as more people of color. So I was a leftist, and I wanted race mixing. And I wanted the borders gone and I wanted the white race dissolved, And so, anyways, that's the way that I started thinking in 2014. I switched from being anti-white and being a communist and a leftist to being pro-white to being like a right winger. So when Noah came, I was trying to tell him like, yeah, communists are actually the racist ones. And Noah was still a leftist. So Noah was like, Noah was trying to tell me that, in the tribal cultures, because the leftists are always like, oh, tribal, they had such wonderful cultures. And, they didn't treat mentally ill people bad. They use the mentally ill as shamans, and that's debatable, right? But again, he's a leftist, and he wants to look at the people of color as superior, right? He probably wants race mixing. But, he's a leftist communist, and he's against, he's pro-Palestinian, and, and he's against borders and stuff. But he's like, in the tribal cultures, they don't have jail. There's an African tribe where if somebody's acting up and being bad, they don't put him in jail, or they don't punish him. What they do is they put him in a circle, and everybody in the tribe says how much they love him and how much he means to them and stuff. But I remember that kind of hit me when he said that, because remember at this time I was acting out, and I was suffering a lot, and I wanted my family, I wanted my mom and dad, and I wanted everybody to be like, hey, Ryan, we love you, you mean a lot to us, and, we'll listen to you about the shoot away machine, and we'll hear what you have to say, and we're not going to just discount you and dismiss you and treat you like shit and, all that stuff. So that's what I wanted. But, but when Noah said that, though, I was like, but dude, like, I think because I was a right winger and I was thinking to myself, you know, yeah, when I became when I was a left winger, I was all about that type of stuff. I was like, yeah, jails are stupid. You know, we should get, you know, defund the police. When I was a leftist in like my whole life, I was like, you know, police are bad. Police are just a gang and it's just white supremacy and, you know, and jails are just white supremacy and it's just to keep black people behind bars, to keep them disenfranchised. And, you know, and it's just because it's a system that's unjust and unfair and for white privilege. And, you know, that's the way I was when I was a leftist. So when Noah's telling me he's against prisons, you know, my whole life I was like him. But then, so in my mind, though, I kind of saw what he was saying. Like, yeah, of course, there's some validity to what he's saying. Like, yeah, it is true that a lot of people who are in jail because they're isolated and disenfranchised. And, you know, and it would be nice if they could have people listen to them and all that stuff. But at the same time, I was thinking to myself, like, I became a right winger. So I was for jail because I was thinking to myself, you know, people of color are they're more sinful and they commit more crimes and stuff. And I was more for the status quo at this point. And I wanted to maintain the status quo and I was against the race mixing. And I thought that, you know, jails were good at this point. Like it's stopping all the crime. It's stopping basically the communist Marxists from, you know, stealing. It's property theft, you know, it maintains the order. I was against, you know, the whole race mixing program type of thing. So, you know, so Noah came and Noah, by his whole life, he was a leftist and I was always a leftist and we were friends. But now he's starting to see that I'm more of a right winger. So, and then there was another thing that Noah showed me. He showed me a video of a cop shooting a black guy running at the cop with a knife. And I was like, well, dude, Noah, the black guy was about to stab the cop. Like, I think that he wanted to be killed. And then Noah's like, yes, he did want to be killed, but should they kill him? And I was like, well, what do you expect, dude? You want the cop to just let the black guy kill him? Like, I think that's like the Jewish fantasy. Your Jewish fantasy, the black guys all kill the cops and the cops be like, oh, let's let go of our guns. And because it's mean. You know, that's why I was like, dude, you're just a stupid leftist communist. I didn't say this to Noah out loud, but I was like, dude, like, come on, live in the real world. Like, you're living in a fantasy. He's an INFJ, so they're idealists, right? But I'm like, dude, I was like, what do you expect, dude? Of course this guy's gonna get shot. He's running at the cop with a knife. But Noah's like, well, cops shouldn't have guns. And they put him in that situation. And, you know, and basically Noah's like, you know, in the better society they wouldn't have guns. And they would find a way to de-escalate the situation and not have to kill the person. But, you know, they would, you know, like say things like they love him and, you know, how much he means to them. And, you know, they would find a way to get, you know, to maybe just leave the guy alone for a while. And so they wouldn't have to kill him. And, you know, that's all nice and it's like compassionate. But again, like in my mind, when I was a leftist, I would have been like, yeah, dude, that's great. Yeah, because I thought that the police system and everything was anti-black and anti-people of color. And it's a way to destroy, you know, or to disenfranchise and kill black people, right? And people of color. But at this point, when I became a right winger, I was like, no, man, I was for the police. I remember when I was a left winger, I was anti-police because I was anti the status quo. I was anti-white. I was anti-white supremacy, right? But then when I became a right winger, I was like, no, dude, like, I'm not for race mixing. I'm not for all this stuff. So this is a kind of shift that I went through in 2014, and I maintained it, and I stayed a right winger. But I'll tell you, then I switched back to left winger a little bit later, and I'll get to the reasons why. And a part of it was because my grandpa started confusing me, and I'm gonna get to that.